My name is Sophia. I am 31 years old, and I need you to stay with me for this one. Because what I am about to tell you is not just about one dinner table comment. It is about a woman who survived something so quietly and so alone that by the time her family was sitting around laughing and making jokes, she had already been through more than most people face in a lifetime. I grew up in a loud, close-knit family in a small town in Ohio. Sunday dinners were a tradition. Everyone showed up. My parents, my aunts and uncles, my cousins, and my older brother Ryan. The golden child, the one who had checked every box our family considered important by the age of 30. Married at 26, 2 kids, a good job, a house with a yard. Ryan was everything our family pointed to when they talked about what a successful life looked like. And then there was me. I was always the different one. Not in a dramatic way. I just moved differently through the world than my family expected. I left Ohio at 22 for a job in Seattle. I built a career in marketing that I was genuinely proud of. I dated when it felt right and did not when it did not. I made choices that made sense to me even when they did not make sense to anyone around the Sunday dinner table. My family loved me. I never doubted that, but love and understanding are two very different things. What none of them knew, what I had told no one in my family, was what the last 3 years of my life had actually looked like. At 27, I had been in a relationship with a man named Daniel. We had been together for 2 years when I found out I was pregnant. I was terrified and overjoyed all at once. The complicated, overwhelming kind of happy that comes when something arrives before you feel completely ready for it. Daniel left 3 weeks after I told him. Not a conversation, not a discussion. He packed a bag while I was at work and left a note on the kitchen counter that said he was not ready for this kind of life. I sat on my kitchen floor that evening with that note in my hands for a very long time. I decided to continue the pregnancy alone. It was the hardest and the most certain decision I have ever made in my life. I told no one in my family. I was not ready for their opinions, their worry, their well-meaning advice that would have felt like noise when what I needed was silence. For 7 months I carried that baby by myself. I went to every appointment alone. I set up a nursery alone. I prepared for a life I had not planned but had chosen completely. At 32 weeks, I lost her. Her name was Lily. I had already named her Lily. I held her for 4 hours in a hospital room by myself before I finally called anyone. The grief that followed was the kind that does not announce itself loudly. It settles into you quietly and lives there, in the way a song on the radio can stop you completely, in the way you walk past the baby section in a store and have to remind yourself to keep breathing, in the way some mornings feel completely normal until they suddenly do not. I went back to work after 2 weeks. I kept my apartment. I kept my routines. I kept moving forward the way I had learned to do my entire life. I told no one. Not my mother. Not my father. Not my brother Ryan with his wife and his 2 kids and his yard and his perfectly assembled life. I carried it alone. Completely and entirely alone. And then 8 months later, I drove back to Ohio for a Sunday dinner. Because that is what you do. You show up. You pass the bread basket. You smile when you are supposed to smile. I sat down at that table and for a while everything was fine. My mom had made her pot roast. My dad was telling a story about his garden. My cousins were arguing about football. And then Ryan looked across the table at me with that easy smile of his and said, "So Sophia, still single? Must be pretty lonely out there in Seattle all by yourself." Everyone laughed. Not meanly. Just the easy laugh of people who have no idea what they are sitting across from. I looked at my brother, and I felt something move through me that I did not have a name for. Not anger. Not sadness. Something quieter and heavier than both. I put my fork down, and I made a decision. I did not cry at that table. I did not snap at Ryan. I did not storm out. I did not give the family a dramatic moment they would talk about for years at future Sunday dinners. I just looked at my brother. This man who had everything our family considered a successful life, and I said, very quietly and very calmly, "Ryan, you have no idea what my life looks like. And honestly, you never asked." The table went quiet. Ryan's smile faded slowly. He looked at me the way people look at someone when they realize a joke landed somewhere it was never supposed to reach. He said soft, "I was just kidding around." I said, "I know you were." And I picked my fork back up and kept eating, but something had shifted in that room. My mother was watching me. My father had gone very still. Even the cousins who had laughed 30 seconds earlier were suddenly quiet. After dinner, my mother followed me into the kitchen while I was helping clear the plates. She put her hand on my arm and said to Sophia, "Is everything okay? Really okay?" I stood at that sink for a long moment with my hands under the warm water. And then for the first time in 3 years I told her all of it. Daniel leaving, the pregnancy, the 7 months I spent preparing for a life with a daughter I had already named, the hospital room, the 4 hours I held Lily before I called anyone. My mother did not say a single word while I talked. When I finished, she turned me toward her and held me the way she used to when I was small and something had scared me. With both arms, completely, like she was trying to cover as much of me as possible, she whispered, "Oh, why didn't you tell me? I would have been there. I would have been on the first flight." I said, "I know, Mom. That is why I didn't call." She pulled back and looked at me, and I could see she was trying to understand what I meant by that. I explained it as gently as I could that I had needed to get through it in my own way, at my own pace, without managing anyone else's grief on top of my own. That it was not a rejection of her love. It was the only way I knew how to survive it. She nodded slowly. She did not fully understand, I could see that too, but she was trying, and that mattered. Ryan came into the kitchen a few minutes later. He had clearly heard some of what I said. His face looked different from the man who had made that easy joke 40 minutes earlier. He stood in the doorway and said to Sophia, "I am so sorry. I had no idea." I looked at my brother, this man I had grown up with, fought with, loved my entire life, and I said, "I know you didn't. That is kind of the point, Ryan." He crossed the kitchen and hugged me, a real hug, the kind that meant something. I let him. That evening changed something in my family quietly and permanently. Not everything. Old habits and assumptions do not vanish after one honest conversation at a kitchen sink. But something opened up that had been closed for a long time. I drove back to Seattle 2 days later. The city looked the same. My apartment looked the same. My life from the outside looked exactly the way it always had. But I felt different. Because I had carried something alone for 3 years that I was never supposed to carry alone. And for the first time I had put a little bit of it down. Grief, I have learned, does not go away. It does not have a finish line or a final chapter. It just slowly, very slowly becomes something you carry differently. Something that weighs a little less on the mornings when the sun comes through the window at the right angle and the city outside is quiet and you can sit with your coffee and feel, for just a moment, something that is close enough to peace. Lily would have been 2 years old that spring. I planted a small pot of flowers on my balcony for her birthday. Just a quiet thing. Just mine. Some things you hold privately not because you are ashamed, but because they are too sacred to share with anyone who has not earned the right to hold them carefully. And some people, the ones who joke about loneliness across a dinner table without knowing what sits across from them, they just have not asked the right questions yet. My brother asks now. Every single time we talk he asks. And that, more than any apology, is what healing in a family actually looks like.